you've asked for it, and honestly, I've kind of been wanting to do this for a while. Mainly because I'm rapidly running out of current Transformers cartoon episodes to review, but also because I thought it'd be interesting to apply my current standards of review to an older series. And you can't get any older than G1, the one that started it all. Now, I'm not going to point out every single time there's an animation error or a character is off model, because, let's be honest, this is G1. You gotta kinda take the bad animation as an artifact of the time. These guys weren't shooting for Disney quality here. At the end of the day, this was a half-hour toy commercial, like it or not. But I will point out the occasional animation error or thing that I felt was kind of odd or funny. So let's get started with the original G1 series opening three-parter, More Than Meets the Eye. In these first 3 episodes, the Autobots, low on energon, leave Cybertron in search of new sources of energy, but they are pursued by the Decepticons, both factions crashing on prehistoric Earth until they are eventually reactivated millions of years later and renew their battle once again. As we begin this first episode, we start with the first 2 Transformers to ever appear on screen, Wheeljack and Bumblebee, as they search for what little energon they can find. This would eventually be homaged in the War for Cybertron Siege Netflix series, some 30 years later. I found it funny how Wheeljack says they have 1 megamile to go. Now, megamiles aren't a real thing. This is obviously just the writer throwing in some made-up space jargon. So, if megamiles work the same way that megameters do, then 1 megamile would equal 1 million regular miles. So, realistically, Wheeljack and Bumblebee would still have a long, long way to go. But in practice in the show, not really. By the way, I really like Wheeljack's Cybertronian mode design here. And Bumblebee's too, of course. Oh, and Jazz, can't forget about Jazz. But Wheeljack's always kind of reminded me of Inspector Gadget's Gadgetmobile for some reason. What do you think? You know, it's too bad that we never got any kind of official toys of these guys in their Cybertronian modes. If only we had a whole line of Transformers toys focused around the Autobots and Decepticons before they arrived on Earth. Oh, and I almost forgot Laserbeak's little Cybertronian bird mode. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a bird or just some kind of drone or something, but he's pretty cute, and again, I wish we had a proper toy of him in this form. But I guess it would be pretty tricky to figure out a way to have his little round Cybertronian bird mode transform into a rectangular cassette mode. Also, apparently even though Bumblebee's car mode on Cybertron is a hover car, he still has wheels and an axle, as we see he loses one of his tires. It is weird how the Transformers robot modes here look like they already have their Earth alt modes before actually coming to Earth. But hey, it's an 80s cartoon. I don't think they really cared enough to make up unique Cybertronian robot modes just for these first few minutes. We're probably lucky that we got Cybertronian alt modes as it is. Also, this might be one of those Mandela effect kind of things, but I seem to remember that on one of the DVD releases of this episode, they recolored Starscream, Thundercracker, and Skywarp to match the Welcoming Committee or Rainmakers or whoever they're supposed to be here. But I checked my Rhino and Shout Factory DVDs, and they're both the same. First they're the original trio, then Rainmakers, then back to the original trio. No recolor remastering to keep it consistent in either DVD version. People often talk about Prime's trailer disappearing, but it's funny how when Shockwave transforms, the front of his gun just flies off screen. Zoop!
The Autobots would have lost eons ago if I'd been calling the shots. My time will come, Megatron. Never!
You gotta love the classic banter between Megatron and Starscream. That's what really made these characters so memorable. You know, I just realized that the flashback with Alita from the search for Alpha Trion must be going on at the same time as this. I've never really thought about that before. I wonder if anyone has ever taken all those flashbacks from that episode and War Dawn and stuff like that and stitched them together with the beginning of this episode to make like a chronological first episode or even movie. Probably not. Another funny bit of animation is that as the meteor shower is hitting the Ark, Jazz just flies out of his seat, but Optimus is just fine. I guess he should have worn his seatbelt. Okay, I know I said I wasn't going to harp on the animation errors too hard, but this scene is just ridiculous. First, they reused the same clip twice in a row. Then we see Soundwave absolutely dominate Jazz, Prowl, and Sideswipe, but Ironhide does a flying dropkick on him that knocks him down. Then he's immediately back up and tosses Ratchet. Then we pan over and there's two Starscreams, one fighting Prowl and one fighting Ironhide. Another Soundwave knocked out, and as we continue to pan over, there's yet another Soundwave fighting Sideswipe. How many Soundwaves is that? 3? 4? So they crash into the volcano, and that's it for this review. I'll see you guys back here for Beast Wars Season 1, Episode 1, Beast Wars Part 1. Until next time, I'm just kidding. But could you imagine if I reviewed Transformers in chronological order? I guess that would mean that I would have to start with the flashbacks in 5 Faces of Darkness. Oh well. So the Autobots and Decepticons crash land on Earth and go into stasis. Unbeknownst to them, the Beast Wars happen. Primal borrows Prime's spark for a minute, as does Megatron with his namesake. Tarantulas tries to blow them all up, but Black Arachnia stops the self-destruct by giving Teletran 1 a virus. Keep that in mind for a minute. And the Beast Wars end with the Maximals yoinking the Autobots mini shuttle, which I guess they either didn't know that they had, or really ever cared about, because they'd never mention it. Then, 4 million years later, Teletran finally wakes up. I gotta say though, looking at this pan, these guys are in rougher shape than Beast Wars depicted. Guys are half blown apart, limbs missing, all that kind of stuff. In Beast Wars, they look pretty well intact, but here, I'm surprised they survived at all. So remember a minute ago how I mentioned how Black Arachnia uploaded a virus to Teletran 1? I wonder if that has anything to do with the Autobot's computer deciding to repair a Decepticon first. Maybe her or the Maximals in general tampering with Teletran 1 in the past messed up its friend or foe logic. Of course, this is all hypothetical. Obviously, G1 came long before Beast Wars, and I doubt the creators of either show thought that deeply about explaining such an insignificant plot point. But it's fun to think about how G1 and Beast Wars might be connected in more ways than intended. This scene is also relevant to the currently upcoming Kingdom toy line, where it's rumored that the fiction behind that line is a little different than what we're familiar with here. Instead of the Ark crashing into the volcano, it lands on top of it safely. And instead of the G1 characters going into stasis lock for 4 million years, they remained awake and were around the same time as the Maximals and Predacons, thus causing some kind of time paradox. Of course, that's just a rumor. By the time the actual toy line, not to mention the Netflix show based on it, come out, that could all change. And of course, Starscream's incompetence is the reason why Optimus Prime and the rest of the Autobots were repaired and reactivated too. If only Starscream had listened to Megatron, they would have easily won the war. Or maybe that's why Starscream did it. Maybe Starscream isn't just trying to usurp Megatron just so he can lead the Decepticons himself. Maybe he's actually a deep cover Autobot spy trying to sabotage Megatron. Wouldn't that make for an interesting story? Man, I better cool it with these fan theory tangents. Otherwise this video is going to be longer than the actual 3-parter. It's interesting that Teletran actually scans an orange truck for Optimus Prime, but he turns into a red truck. I wonder if Optimus Prime would be as iconic as he is if he was orange instead of red. Also, I'm surprised with all the toys and repaints that he's had, we never got an orange Optimus Prime that homages this scene. I guess then he'd look too much like Huffer.
We'll set up here. Those rocks will serve as our base of operations.
Really? Megatron chooses a bunch of rocks as his base? He couldn't at least find a cave or something? Similar to how I thought Rhino or Shout Factory might have recolored the Seekers earlier in the episode, when we see Prime pacing, Cliffjumper is actually recolored to look like Bumblebee here, and I thought maybe someone had corrected him to be red here. But again, in both versions, he is still a yellow Cliffjumper. Bumblejumper?
I've got Megatron dead center in my viewfinder.
Obviously, Cliffjumper needs to have his sights adjusted. It's so weird how Laserbeak can apparently just detach one of his guns and have it fly around and shoot on its own. And this is never explained, addressed, or mentioned ever again. Makes you wonder what exactly the original script called for here. And like with the Seekers and Yellow Cliffjumper, I could have sworn someone had recolored Holler here so that he didn't look like Grapple. who I'm betting in reality he was originally supposed to be. But maybe they didn't have his name finalized yet, so they just called him Hauler instead of Grapple. But anyways, yeah, sure enough, it was just my imagination. Hauler is Grapple Orange in both the Rhino and Shout Factory versions. Does every human in this episode dress the same or what? Also, they don't even wait to see what the Decepticons want. They just start throwing stuff at them. They could at least try the universal greeting first. Oh yeah, for some reason the Autobots can fly just like the Decepticons for most of this three-parter, but by the end of it, they'll have somehow lost that ability. Again, I'd like to see an in-universe fictional reason why, since we never get an explanation here. Wait, how did I miss that the Autobots had this little kind of annex by their base? I don't think we ever see it again in another episode. I like how some of the Transformers have special powers. That's something I wish they did more in other Transformers series. I don't think it's really until animated that we see something like that again. I like how Soundwave moves his arm when he says Tidal Wave. I don't know, it's just a cool little flourish you rarely see. Oof, I think Hound took a pile driver to the crotch plate there. That's gotta hurt. Aw, look at the little Starscream colored reflector dude. He's so cute. It's like Starscream has his own little mini-me. Apparently Wheelie isn't the first Transformer to wield a slingshot. Starscream had his own, years before Wheelie did. Ah yes, the iconic battle atop the dam, where Optimus and Megatron used their respective energy melee weapons, and basically never again in this series, even though they'd be homaged countless times afterwards. Starscream once again seemingly sabotages Megatron's efforts by wasting a bunch of their Energon cubes. Are we sure Starscream isn't actually a double agent working for the Autobots? I wonder how exactly they get energy out of these ruby crystals of Burma. Maybe they're actually some kind of rarefied crystallized Energon. Again, retroactively linking to Beast Wars, maybe after millions of years, some of the raw Energon crystals turned red.
I can't wait to get back to Cybertron. Earth's so flat. Yeah, I know what you mean, Thundercracker.
Oh man, don't tell me that Thundercracker and Skywarp are flat earthers. I gotta say, Roller is pretty cute with his little R2-D2 boops and beeps. I wish Optimus used Roller more in the show. So with Optimus rolling down the hill, we transition to part 3 of More Than Meets the Eye. And I've gotta say, I really like the way they're drawn here. There's something about them that looks a little more sleek and stylized than they're usually depicted in this show.
I remember the time on Cybertron.
Save the war stories, hotshot.
Okay, for one thing, isn't telling old war stories Cup's thing? And second, that's Ironhide there, Optimus. Hotshot is another dude, and he's not even from your continuity.
Optimus Prime cares a lot for his fellow robots, and he doesn't want anything to happen to them. I think he'd make a neat president.
Well, I can't disagree there, and that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Hound, when we get back to Cybertron, will you make me a big house with a 4-car garage?
Wait, why does Mirage want a 4-car garage? He is a car. What is he going to park in that garage? Or is a garage like a bedroom to an Autobot? In that case, why does he need 4 bedrooms? Anyways, moving on.
Ravage, he escaped.
Perfect.
Why does everyone have this dumb, surprised expression on their faces? They were all in on the plan. This shouldn't be a surprise. This sequence is kind of weird and silly. The way it's put together, it makes it look like the Decepticons were waiting for Hound to project his hologram before attacking. Then we have the Autobots dressed up in lab coats for some reason. I guess they were trying to disguise themselves as humans, like the Ninja Turtles or something. And then I guess the Decepticons built a bunch of fake Decepticons? So maybe they were waiting after all. It's kind of weird how at the end of the episode, it looks like the Decepticons have built up the circle of rocks that was their base into a butt. What, it's pronounced butte? Are you sure? That can't be right. Well, the Decepticons' big butt, or butte, kind of reminds me of the one that the Autobots in Transformers Prime were based in. Isn't that weird how it's kind of flipped here?
It's just you and me now, Megatron.
Then you better get some help.
You're old, Megatron. Yesterday's model, ready for the scrap heap. Junk! That's what you are. Junk!
Silence!
I gotta say, I love the fight banter that we had in G1. It's just not the same in the movies or in Prime, where they're always talking about good and evil. I liked how in G1, Optimus and Megatron weren't above insulting each other. At the same time, I also like how it looks like Megatron is holding the door for his fellow Decepticons. It shows that he's not without good manners, and he actually cares about his crew. I'd also like to point out this one particular random lavender-colored Seeker. You can actually spot them a few times during this episode. I know that there's a lot of random Seeker recolors, but I don't think there's a named one that looks exactly like this one. They kind of look like Nova Storm or Slipstream, and who knows, they might be female too. Especially when you see them on the elevator, they are kind of drawn like they could be a female. Who knows, maybe a new female Seeker for Hasbro to do a repaint of. Also, the way Optimus cries out Megatron's name here totally reminds me of when Beast Wars Optimus did the same thing. I kinda wish that became a running thing in other Transformers series, like how Optimus always sacrifices himself.
Oh, you Optimuses do love to sacrifice yourselves, don't you?
And of course, now suddenly the Autobots can't fly, even though at the beginning of this very episode they were still flying about. But oh well. And we end with apparently the governments of the world giving the Autobots enough fuel to revitalize Cybertron.
It's probably the first time all the governments ever agreed on anything.
And the Autobots preparing to return home, along with Spike and Sparkplug. Although I'm assuming that this plot point was thrown out considering that the Autobots are still on Earth in the next episode. So that's it for the very first 3 episodes of The Transformers, More Than Meets the Eye. It's a fun bunch of episodes. It does a pretty good job setting the tone for the rest of the series. Or at least for the first couple seasons, where it seemed like almost every other episode was about the Decepticons trying to steal some form of energy or power, and the Autobots stopping them. It does a great job establishing the characters, like Jazz as second in command, Ironhide the grumpy old warrior, and of course, the treacherous Starscream. It also shows off some of the characters' special abilities and powers, which they may or may not use again in future episodes. Again, being a product of its time, it's hard to expect more from this show. And obviously, this being a brand new franchise, things like the Decepticons being able to fly but the Autobots not were still being worked out. But I think this is still a great start to the Transformers. Well, what did you think of the beginning of the Transformers, the series opening 3-parter, More Than Meets the Eye? As always, let me know down in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe, and do all that other fun stuff. And join me next time for episode 4 of G1, Transport to Oblivion.